Good afternoon, Dylan with Huntsville Guns. Nice and chilly, windy day here. Got the door closed on the shop, got the heater running, so you'll hear a little bit of background noise. I want to cover one of today's projects, kind of a unique scope mount situation. So customer drops off a Marlin Model 39A. It's JM marked gun, but probably later in the Marlin made Marlins before Remington acquired them. The scope that he's putting on there is a Leupold VX Freedom rimfire. It's 3 to 9 by 40. Pretty good little scope for rimfire applications. Decent scope for the money. And we are mounting the scope using a set of Conetrol rings. If you're not familiar, these are a proprietary rifle ring style made here in Seguin, Texas, just down the road from where I'm at. They have kind of an unusual cult-like following. There are a lot of guys who are firm believers in them. I believe when they were kind of introduced, they were really popular in the safari hunting crowd. A very robust ring setup, and they have some unique features to them. So I've already done the install on this. I tried to film a video to capture how they go together, but there are too many moving pieces and too small, and trying to get it on the rifle and get everything lined up, it's not going to come together. But I can talk you through the basics of them. So, like I said, JM marked Model 39A, beautiful rifle. It's in exceptional shape, probably an early 2000s gun if I had to guess. With the scope already mounted, you can see that it is a snug fit to the barrel. Give you some background so you can pick up on that. There is just a sheet of paper's thickness between the scope and the barrel. But on a rimfire, not a big issue. So the rings in question, you can see the brand name here, Conetrol. And they are a split style ring. They are split vertically, so the two halves go around the scope like this. And they have this strange little dovetailed cap, if I can get some focus, there we go, on the top of the ring. So you put the two rings around the scope so the top of the rings are touching. Then you install the cap down over the top. And then when you pivot the rings together, it expands those two top halves and it locks the dovetail in. I'll try to draw it and show you what I'm talking about. That may be a better option as I think about it. So the rings go around the scope body, and then at the top they have a little dovetail portion. I'm not an artist. And when you close the rings together, they are somewhat like this. And when you put that cap over the top of the rings, the cap is cut per ring. So each how do I want to phrase this? The front ring and the back ring are unique to each other. They are made in singles, not as a pair. And so when ordering them, it's important to order one if you just need a front ring, but if you need a pair of rings, you have to order two, quantity each. So as the rings clamp together at the bottom, there's a lug that is formed, and that lug goes into the scope base itself. You can see the bottom of it. Let me grab a pointer here underneath. You can see the bottom of that lug that goes into the scope base, kind of similar to like a Redfield base, I believe is what they're called. And then there are grub screws on the side of this scope base that are tapered. The front of them is a point, and there is a corresponding socket in the lug that goes into the scope base. And so when you tighten those grub screws, they, in a very controlled manner, they're conical, so they push those two ring bottoms together. But one of the cool features about that design is you can use those grub screws by adjusting the left and right on the grub screw. You can adjust the scope alignment with the bore of the rifle. So you have a second adjustment outside of the scope's internal adjustments. If your scope is canted one way or the other, you can adjust the grub screws on the scope base to align those two to each other. So I installed the base, much like the manufacturer's suggestion. There's not a lot of information online about these. I didn't find a particular YouTube video that describes how they go together or anything from the manufacturer to cover anything outside of some marketing data. But like I said, putting the top of the rings together first, installing that cap, and then bringing the bottom of the two ring halves together opens the top slightly and locks that dovetail in. Gives it a very sleek, smooth finish, but also a very strong locking mechanism. These are steel rings, and so those dovetails, when they bite together, it's pretty much rock solid. And then by adjusting the grub screws using a collimator, I have aligned the scope to the bore of the rifle, and that should save me a little bit of time on the range. The manufacturer suggests a 25-yard zero, adjusting the grub screws to get on paper, and then when you get out to 100-yard, after you're on at 25-yard, that's when you start using the internal adjustments on the scope. Kind of a unique concept. Like I said, I don't see many of these. They're not as popular as they used to be. Again, they are called Conetrol rings, Conetrol. Kind of a unique setup. Like I said, they were popular on safari guns 15, 20 years ago, and they've slowly kind of faded into the gray. I still think they're a very viable option. I will tell you that at the time of filming this on the Conetrol website, the rings are $192 a pair, and the base, which depending on the rifle, this rifle has a one-piece base, but if you had a bolt action, they make a split base for it, so there's a front and a back half. The base for your weapons platform is $108. That is their Hunter series. They also make a Gunner series, a limited series, and a custom series, and they get more expensive the further you get from Hunter. It's not a cheap option for mounting a scope. In this customer's situation, he is replicating something that belonged to a family member of his, so I was more than happy to accommodate. From a billing standpoint, from a gunsmith to a customer, these are not as easy to install as a traditional, what we will call a traditional set of rings. There's a little more consideration involved. They're not as easy to level as traditional rings. So on a traditional ring where the scope sits on a saddle, you put the scope in there, you can align your reticle. With these, when you put the cap on the top of them, the rings fit the body of the tube very, very tightly. And because of that tight fit, the scope cannot be rotated easily without marring the sides of your scope tube. So there's a little extra consideration there. I would not charge the same to install a set of Conetrol rings as I would a regular set of rings. Because of that, there's a little bit more time involved. Also, a strange note on the manufacturer's website, there are no torque specifications given for any of their products. I attempted to reach out to them and get some more information and couldn't get anybody to answer the telephone. But in their installation instructions that you can find on their website, there are 0 torque values given. Normally when installing scope bases, the scope manufacturer and the ring manufacturer and the base itself manufacturer give torque values, 15 inch-pounds, 18 inch-pounds, 25 inch-pounds, whatever the case may be. I found it a bit odd that they didn't, but I also understand that because of the adjustability, it's hard to give a specific value to torque to. Personally, $300 for a scope ring setup is spendy. There are cheaper options, in my opinion, that do just as good of a job. This is, like I said, it's aimed at a very specific market, and I may not necessarily be their customer personally. As far as the time involved, I would say it probably takes set the rifle up in a gun vise, level the rifle, install the base. You're probably 5-10 minutes there. Installing the rings on the scope tube and getting them aligned to each other, front ring and the back ring aligned, because if you don't, they won't fit into the recesses on the scope base. Another 5 or 10 minutes there. Putting the grub screws in, torquing everything to a reasonable torque spec, and then installing the collimator and aligning the scope body to the bore of the rifle. There's probably another 10 minutes there, maybe 10-15 minutes. So a normal set of scope bases or scope rings I can install and have a scope put on sub 10 minutes. This is probably 3 or 4 times that in the length of time, but should make for a very, very, very rugged and durable mount for this customer. I won't get into the money side of it. This customer is also a friend of mine, so I'm probably going to bill him a little bit differently than I would a normal customer. But if you're billing $50 to install a scope, this would probably be $75 to install, just because there's some extra time and steps involved. The manufacturer does list that you can use, let me find the word that they use, shellac, I believe, to install the base screws. Shellac's not something I keep on hand, and so I used blue Loctite to install them. I would also recommend the same for any scope applications. Loctite's affordable, and it's cheap insurance that the scope doesn't move in the rings in the long run. Overall, pretty simple job, just a unique scope ring style that I don't see often. Figured I'd share with y'all. I am going to be taking a couple of personal days. I have been invited by a customer to go on a whitetail hunt, and so I am going to take them up on that offer. I'll be out of the shop for the next few days. Hopefully can get some video while I'm out hunting for you guys. Again, this channel is more on gunsmithing, not necessarily on the hunting side, but I have chosen a 6.5 PRC for the hunt. The majority of the hunting that we're doing, this is a high fence property, and so we're going on management hunt. It's all management animals, not trophy animals. There are a lot of does that need to be harvested off of this property to bring it back into a balance. And so the 6.5 PRC that I'm taking, super comfortable with, have hundreds of rounds through it, and it is laser beam accurate. There are some bucks on the property that, if given the opportunity, need to be culled, or if they show up to the stand that I'm sitting in, they are on the green light list to get culled. And so hopefully we'll come back with some antlers, not just a cooler full of meat. Like I said, with that being said, I will be out of the shop for a couple of days. I don't know that I will have any videos to publish between now and then. I've pre-filmed some stuff in the event that I can't get anything in the meantime, but it's mostly just filler content. So with that being said, hope you guys have a great weekend, and hopefully we'll see you sometime middle of next week. Thanks for hanging out.